The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew.
Glory to you, Lord.
Jesus told his disciples this parable. The kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones, when taking their lamps, brought no oil with them, but the wise brought flasks of oil with their lamps. Since the bridegroom was long delayed, they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight there was a cry, "Behold the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all those virgins got up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the wise ones replied, "No, for there will not be enough for us and you. Go instead to the merchants and buy some for yourselves." While they went off to buy it, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went into the wedding feast with him. Then the door was locked. Afterwards, the other virgins came and said, "Lord, Lord, open the door for us." But he said in reply, "Amen, I say to you, I do not know you. Therefore, stay awake, for you know neither the day nor the hour." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
It was right around when I was in 6th grade in the 1980s that this football rivalry began between Miami and Notre Dame. And a few years after my 6th grade year, there was this entrepreneur, this guy who was like a college guy, and he wanted to sell T-shirts at Notre Dame right before this big game. Miami had won like 2 straight seasons in a row, and Notre Dame was sick of it. And so this guy made up a T-shirt called Catholics versus the Convicts. And he sold over 3,000 of them. Now, the thing that I didn't like about that is I'm a Miami fan, and I'm a priest today. And the reason why I'm a Miami fan is because my mom went to Miami, my godmother went to Miami, and my godfather went to Miami. So last night the game was played. It was Miami against Notre Dame, and the good team won. And it wasn't the Catholic team, so to speak. But what's so interesting is how people can just start to take sides based on a uniform, based on a name, rather than a personal conviction. And sometimes in our own lives, we can think if I wear the uniform or if I just show up, that's all we need. And it's interesting when you think about our lives, and especially when I was in 6th grade, I was up at St. Bernard's. I had just became an altar server. And my faith was still kind of hard to understand because you had so many things going on. It's hard to go to Mass and enjoy it or even think about church at all. I was usually more interested in what the Steelers and the Penguins and the Pirates were doing than what I was going on at Mass. But it's dawned on me as I think about this now that one of the great parts of coming to Mass is just seeing people here together that have your back. That when you look to your right and to your left, and as Tom was telling us to look to the back and walk up, and you hear this different music and thing, it's like one time out of the week in which we harmonize our thoughts, our hearts, our prayers, our tears, our fears, and just bring them to the Lord as a community. Could you imagine if nobody else was here except you? The experience would be kind of eerie. Maybe you'd feel kind of lonely. Well, you'd still have to put the collection in, though. Don't worry. So there's something about just being able to sit around with other people and be able to hear a message. And one thing that helps me so much when I come to Mass is to arrive a couple minutes early, and there's those beautiful votive candles in the back. Maybe you could light a votive candle for your grandmother or for a friend, or just to look what's going on. Why do you think there would be a flag in the sanctuary today? We don't usually have a flag. Or a movie projector. We're going to watch a movie today at Mass. Yeah. So, different Masses have different symbols that we we try to emphasize. And just last week, obviously, we had all these relics of our boys because we were celebrating both St. Simon and Jude, and we were also celebrating the saints. And so it's like when you walk into the Penguins arena, what do you see but number 66, the jersey of Mario Lemieux retired there. And you see these icons, which are visible memories of the great people that went before us, the saints. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever been to a wedding before, but I am in the series now, 7 weddings in 2 months just for my family. And then we add that to the other weddings that I have. And like this Saturday, it's come to a culmination. I have 3 weddings in one day. And what's so exciting about all that is that it's just so awesome to watch a dear bride walk up and encounter her groom and come to the church and exchange their lives together. And you know how they do that? They do that in a church. They do that with scripture readings. And the first thing that married couples do once they exchange their vows is they receive the Eucharist. They come together just as we do today. So one of the greatest things you can do to prepare for whatever your vocation is to come to Mass and receive communion, because that is going to be the Eucharistic Gatorade that we need when things get tough and we feel like, I just can't handle this anymore. And we come and we realize that. And so what's so interesting is today we get a glimpse of what a wedding was like 2,000 years ago. Weddings lasted for days. It wasn't just like a 2-hour ceremony. It was 7 days long. And before those 7 days started, the couple would come together and they would exchange their vows. And they would look at each other in the eyes and say, I want to be with you for the rest of my life. And they exchange that great I do. And then the celebration would start for 7 days. But the bride and the groom wouldn't share the same house. For 1 week, they would have these different festive moments going on, but they wouldn't live together yet. And so they wouldn't, what they call consummate, or have that beautiful marital embrace until 7 days were over. And if you remember, there's another scene where Jesus, he comes into a wedding and they ran out of wine. Now, some of us don't like wine, but wine's important in a wedding because it symbolizes a lot and it's fun to drink, but not too much of it, obviously, And so Jesus walks in and there's no wine. Could you imagine if you're like going around trick-or-treating for Halloween and you ran out of candy and then like 200 kids were coming? That's like what was going on. And so Jesus realizes that and he's like, whoa. And Mary looks at him and says, Jesus, you got to do something about this. And Jesus is like, what? And then all of a sudden, Mary gives this great advice. And if you don't hear me say anything today, at least know what Mary said to Jesus. They were running out of Halloween candy, and Mary goes, just listen to whatever Jesus says. That you can imagine the panic at the door if you see like 100 trick-or-treaters coming and you've run out of all the candy. And so Mary looks at the couple that was trying to, give out the candy and just says, just do whatever Jesus says. And you know what Jesus ended up doing? He didn't just give those little candies that you get, like those small ones. He gave the jumbo size, like Milky Way and the Baby Ruth kinds and the Snickers out, That's how Jesus works. Why am I talking about Halloween? Oh, yeah. Oh, so then the Halloween, the weddings. And so what happens at these weddings, they would go on for 7 days. And what we're picking up today in the gospel with this oil and no oil and the stupid, the smart and the wise and the foolish bridesmaids and stuff like that. Well, what was going on here is that like every night they'd have these things going on. So you needed to have the supplies ready in order to be able to go do it. But the last night was super cool. You know what they do on the last night? They'd have this procession with the bride and the groom. And they would start at the groom's house, and then they would go pick up the bride, and then they would walk with the bride and the groom, and they would take them to their house where they would finally be able to live together. And right before they would have that beautiful moment in which they would be able to consummate the marriage, they had like the biggest feast of all the feasts. And so that's what they were waiting for. This was the last night. And the bridegroom was taking a little longer. He's probably watching the Penguin game. They went into overtime, and then they went into a shootout, and then they lost. And the bridegroom's like, man, I don't know if I can make this wedding tomorrow. But he makes it. He just comes a little late. He's at midnight. And so there's no oil. In other words, in order to be able to like have a flame, do you see the two sixth grade is great. They had the candles here, right? Well, these candles are fueled by a little wick, and that's how they burn. But some candles, they can burn by oil, and you use like this. You ever see Rambo? You know, like he had this bandana, and he takes the bandana off, he dips it in oil, and then he wraps it around a stick. Well, that's kind of what it's like, you know? Rambo, I haven't used that one in a while. So at any rate, the thing is so they're walking around with this procession, and they need to have these lamps lit in order to be able to walk in the darkness. But what's so weird about this, and this is how you know Jesus is trying to tell us something more than just simply a nice procession at night, is that he says to them that the foolish ones don't have enough oil. And so thus they need to go buy more oil. But they don't walk very far. So it wasn't like they needed like a ton of oil. And if you think about it, 2,000 years ago, there was no 24-hour Walmart or like 7-Eleven to go to. Like tonight, you could wake up at midnight and you could go down to McDonald's and grab a McRib, you know? Well, they didn't really have that back then, 2,000 years ago. There was no stores open then. And so if somebody had heard this when Jesus was saying this, they're like, what are you talking about? You don't need a ton of oil, and you certainly can't go buy oil at midnight. So he's not really just talking about any old wedding feast. He's talking about something that symbolizes something bigger than just a one-night party. And you know, when you look at some of the great saints who've thought about this and say, what is Jesus really getting at? One of these great saints, his name is Augustine, and he lived in northern Africa. And one of the great things about Augustine is that he never wanted to be a Christian until the very end, when all of a sudden he realized Jesus was calling him to be a Christian. And there's this beautiful scene where his mom, who had been praying for him, his mom who had brought him to church, and he kept running out of church, his mom who loved him and all that, she had cried so much for him that he realized that the love that his mother had for him is what brought him to church. And he writes in this little book that it was the tearful prayers of my mom that brought me to Jesus. So sometimes as parents or as adults, we can be discouraged because it's so hard to raise our children. But we know that it's possible. And St. Augustine, he looks at this gospel passage, and he looks at this oil, and he looks at what's going on here, and he said, what in the world does this oil stand for? And he looks back at a different part of the gospel, and Jesus says, be the light of the world. Take your light and shine it around the world. And so St. Augustine starts to look at what this oil and what this light is all about. And it's about doing these awesome works so that our works can shine into the darkness of the world, and so that we can be light to the world. And so when you look at the oil, what is the oil? The oil are those good works that we do. Like when you wake up in the morning, you say, Mom, I will empty the dishwasher. That's a good work. That's how you build up the oil. Or you look at your little brother who can't tie his shoes, and you say, don't worry about it, little Jimmy, I'm going to get your shoes for you. Or when you're trying to leave and it's like really hard, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what, I'm not going to try to ride shotgun. I'm going to sit in the back and let another person ride shotgun. This is how you build up the oil of good works and allow the light of Christ to shine through you. And those of us who realize that, well, what are the good works that Jesus Christ asks us to do? Well, wow, can you think of a better time to do great works than in this time of Thanksgiving? And if you look at your bulletins with me, you can find some great examples of good works that we can do to fill up our lamps so that we're not caught at night in the darkness, but we can be bright. And look at look at page 4. Could we not today as a family, maybe before we eat dinner tonight, after the Steelers beat the Colts, could we not pray this prayer as a family for our veterans? What a great work that would be. Or even maybe read some of these beautiful names of people. One here is actually somebody who is a POW. They still haven't found him. And we've been praying for years. And then you can see down below the picture of this dear man who's been he was a parishioner here, and he spent 30 years in Afghanistan, and now he gets to come home back to his home, and he's been faithful to his mission, and so he's thanking us for all the years of prayers because now he's retired. And then you look at page 5, and just as these altar servers are here, you see boy, wouldn't it be great? Maybe some of you could help me with Eucharistic ministry. We're always looking at, especially at different masses, we don't have enough people to transmit, to bring the chalice and to give communion or to serve or to read or to greet. And so what a beautiful way to fill up our lamps. Or if you just turn the page over and you see page 7, the only reason why we can do 6th, 7th, 8th, whatever grade of faith formation is because the parents entrust their children to our teachers. And we have such a great group of volunteer teachers that have been doing work here for years. We also team up with different people who have been helping us from, that Beth Ann has been working with. And it's just so great to see these teachers come together like today. And so maybe you feel called to help volunteer in our faith formation and help us with the tremendous thing. And you can see the picture of the 8th graders, and you can see the 7th grade. Or turn to page 8. And because of the generosity of some of you here, St. Vincent de Paul is able to offer money to a family that couldn't pay their apartment rent, or offer food because they couldn't pay their food bills. And so St. Vincent de Paul is another group that's helping us with this great light and oil filling up our flasks. Or down below, the senior corner, and those of you who are retired and love to join us for maybe a breakfast or to come and be a part of the group. Or look at page 9. This is awesome, what the Ladies of Charity are doing. And we have this Christmas tree coming in, and you can assist unwed mothers or homeless mothers in a shelter or handicap, or even like Thanksgiving. Anybody wants to join me? I'd love to. You know how much I hate shopping, right? Like Black Friday to me is like the day before hell would set in. It's just all shopping all day long, and all you think about is rage shopping, and you see anyway. But so instead of that, this Friday, the Friday after Thanksgiving, that Black Friday, from 9 to 12, we're going to go down to the convention center with Christians from all around Pittsburgh to try to make 1 million meals for homeless. And we'll be praying, and we'll have some music, and what a great way to kind of work off our Thanksgiving belly, by doing that. So that's called Amen to Action. You can go online and find stuff like that. But, or turn to page 10, and you start to hit the reality of St. Simon and Jude. And as somebody's told me humbly, they said, well, obviously, Father, you got to improve your homilies. So you see page, October 2017, the average weekly attendance, 1,145. And if we rewind to like 2007, you see there's 1,582, and you see there's less people coming to church, and maybe the invitation is, wow, maybe I have a friend who I could bring with me. As far as I can tell, if you look to your right and your left, there is room in your pew, right? Does anybody not have room on your pew? I mean, it looks like there's room to the right and left. So until we fill this place, we shouldn't be satisfied. And so, and there's no doubt I always need to improve on my homily. And so page 11, and maybe as a married couple, to go on a retreat and to really offer your family a marriage that's not just surviving but thriving, or to go on a retreat. And then the final page, you can see maybe it's time to refresh the flask by going to reconciliation, or just jumping on board with something here at St. Simon and Jude, or whatever. Just want to finish with this. There was a priest, his name was Father Vincent Capodanno, and he inspired me the day that I saw this story. He served in Vietnam. And Vietnam was obviously a very difficult battle or war for the Americans and all that. And so anyway, he was an army chaplain. And one day his whole group got ambushed, and most of the soldiers in this died. And so he was actually shot. And one of the things that he did was he went around and he offered last rites. And at one point, the enemies came back and they had the gun pointing at one of the guys that he was trying to save. And so he ran to get his body. And now when they found this Father Vincent dead on the battlefield, they noticed that he had bullets in his back. And that's like a dishonorable way to die in the military. And so they weren't sure if they should honor him with, the different military honors. And what they found out is 2 or 3 weeks after he died, one of the soldiers that was in the battle was knocked unconscious, and he came to. And they asked him about what happened and about Father Vincent. And he goes, well, what Father Vincent did, and the reason why he had bullets in his back, is because as these gunners were coming to shoot him, Father Vincent carried this body of this guy over this hill. And as he got shot in the back, he laid the body down. The body fell down a little bit so that this man didn't die. But Father Vincent saved his life as he took 11 bullets to the back. And you wonder, maybe none of us are ever going to be called to anything like that. But I can just imagine how each of us lifting each other up by doing acts of charity, by just doing those small works around our house or around our school, how we can lift each other up to give each other the beautiful reward of being close to Christ. Tomorrow, Pittsburgh's going to honor what they call Random Acts of Kindness Day. Wouldn't that be great if this week we tried to fill our oil with random acts of kindness for our brothers and our sisters, for our moms and our dads, for our friends and our teachers?